Okay, so I am recording now in case somebody else comes later and wants to see the video. So the plan for today is simple. The first section of the class, I really want to give you some idea of what to expect for the next few days. And then whatever time we have left, I will use it to finish the material. And the last section is about the future of Latin America. So we'll see how much time we have left. Before I do that, any questions, any comments?
I have one on the paper.
Yes.
Is it okay if we go over 1,500 words?
Yes, David. I've been having conversations with other people, and if you go over 100, 200 words, that's totally fine. I mean, even if you go all the way to a couple of thousand words, that's fine. I mean, I would prefer to keep it short, concise, but sometimes depending on the topic that you selected, it is hard. So no worries. If you go over, that's fine. You don't have to cut material and start deleting words here and there. It's not a exact science. So this was just to give you a ballpark idea of the size of the paper.
Okay.
By the way, I have received around 10, 11 papers so far. The deadline is today at 5 o'clock. So please keep that in mind. You knew that the due date was today by 5 o'clock since day one of the semester. So, okay. So very quickly, a couple of hints or information regarding the second exam, the midterm number 2, and the final. Both exams are going to have the same structure as the first exam. So if you remember, there are two parts. The first is a definition-based type of question, and the second part is the short answer type of question. So for the midterm number 2, you're going to have exactly the same number of questions and exactly the same number of choices or options to choose from. I forgot what they are now. The only difference between the second midterm and the final exam is that you are going to have more choices. But, for example, in the first midterm and the second midterm, I am asking you to define 5 concepts out of a list of 7, I believe. Well, in the final, I think I'm going to give you, define 5 concepts for a total of 25 points, 5 points each, out of 10 or 12 different concepts. So in a way, it's a bit easier because I'm giving you way more choices. So if you feel stronger in a particular area, well, just go for those, right? Something similar with the second part, the short answers, the short answer type of questions. We are going to have 3 questions, but I'm going to give you more choices. So it's exactly the same, exactly the same. Another important difference is that for the second midterm, you only have 1 hour, which is the allocated amount of time during class time. But for the final, you're going to have 2 hours, right? I don't expect anybody to use the full 120 minutes, quite frankly. But if you need to, you're welcome to do that. The idea again is that you are short, concise, straight to the point. Eden, please go ahead.
But that 2 hours, I have so many emojis covering my face. But that 2 hours is going to start earlier, correct? So, I mean, later. So it won't be at 2 o'clock. It'll be at 3?
That is correct.
Okay.
Let me check the time. The time of the final exam, which is in your syllabus, is 3:30 on May 12th.
That's what I thought. I was making sure that was still the case. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Eden. So you're right. Starting at 3:30, you're going to have all the way to 5:30 to finish answering the final exam. Right. In the past, because whether it's online or face-to-face, I don't remember anybody taking that long. But again, if you want to take or you need to take that long, that's what the time is for, right? In this setting, I have to be honest because well, you can be checking your notes or doing this and that. I am a bit hesitant to say, hey, take all the time that you need. But that's the regulation of the university. They have to go by it. So, any other question? Any other comment about the exam, about the structure, about the paper, anything?
Hey, Professor, I had a question regarding the study guide. Do you want to wait till later, or is it fine if I ask?
No, please go ahead, Sandeep.
Okay, so on a few of the questions, I was like, for this question, it says, discuss the challenges faced by Latin America in the distribution of income, assets, and relate it to the issue of poverty, and then what can be done to address these problems. So that's the question, and there's like a lot of different answers you can put on what can be done to address these problems. So I mean, it kind of seems like more of like an opinionated question. I mean, you could go with like the neoclassical approach, or you could go with the more of the social spending approach. So are you looking for one over the other? I'm just trying to figure out.
That is a very good question, Sandeep. The answer is the following. Critical thinking is one of the most important skills that I hope you develop throughout the ECON program, not just this class, but throughout the entire economics program. And I know some of you are not econ majors, so hopefully you're going to have some exposure to this idea in this class at least, and perhaps others. So the answer is yes, Sandeep, in the sense that I really want you to write what you think, but it's not just answering as you would talk to your neighbor or to a friend, or no, you're talking to your econ professor or your classmates. So you're in an econ class. So try to answer whatever you think is the right answer using the tools that you have learned in the class. So for example, in this particular question, I remember some students saying, well, like you said, the neoliberal approach. Well, we just keep drilling down. We just keep improving the implementation of the neoliberal model. We just need to make sure that we have the institutional framework correct, efficient regulation. That's one way. Or some other students have gone completely the opposite. They say, well, if you really want to improve income distribution, wealth, reduce poverty, we need to get rid of the neoliberal policies. We need more government intervention. We need more regulation. We need a welfare system similar to the U.S. So you can go any way you want, any direction that you want. Just make sure that you provide the argument, the rationale behind, because I have my own opinion and I can give it to you, but that's not the purpose of the class. I don't want to influence your thinking. What I want you is to develop your own thinking, and sometimes writing, thinking about it is the only way to do it. So this is the purpose of those questions, Sandeep. So I'm glad you identify this one. There are others in the same couple of lists. Not all of them are just straight, this is the question, this is the answer, located in, whatever chapter. No, some questions are tougher, and that's by design. Yes.
Awesome. All right. Just wanted to make sure real quick too. There's a question that asks, what are the major sub-regional trading blocks in the Western Hemisphere, and how are they different in aim, application, and scope? When in regards to the sub-regional trading blocks, pretty much just tariffs, quotas, right, and embargoes, right? Those are sub-regional trading blocks, right?
No. In this particular question, I'm talking about something different. If you remember, we talk about different levels of integration. So we start with a free trade area that would be like NAFTA, where in this case, 3 countries, the US, Canada, and Mexico produce a common front against everybody else, but they have to, and then we have the customs union, and then you move to the next level, and then you get to the European Union. So what I want you to do in this question is to describe each of the levels of regional integration and then provide examples of each. So economic union, we only have one, the European Union. Free trade agreements, we have a lot of them. The most famous one for us is NAFTA, but there are many others. And the same with, you know, the customs unions and all that. So does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I was thinking that, but that was the first question was on that topic, so I didn't think, you know, it would be like another one, but it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other guys? Any other question or comment about this? This is good. Good conversation about this. Yeah. Let's see. I have 23 students. That's a good number. All right. So, like I said, I am just going to. I want to make 3 points regarding the future of Latin America, and then, well, we can call it a day. Okay. Let me prepare. I have opened some exams because I didn't know if you want to ask me questions, so I have to make sure they are closed before I share my screen. All right. Here it is. Okay. So the future of Latin America, the very last section on ECON 181. And as I mentioned before, you know, I have to be careful when I talk about this because contrary to popular belief, economists don't have a crystal ball. So we don't know really what's going to happen. And we normally speak in terms of scenarios, possibilities. We can do that. You know, we are good at stats. We're good at different options, and that's what we do. But anyway, the first point I want to make is this. Latin America faces 2 important challenges. Number 1, Latin America as a region with all this common history and all these common challenges, you know, based on agriculture, raw materials, the deficits in education, in agriculture, and all of these things that we have developed, has to figure out how to find a place in the world economy. You know, in my box, I'm talking about a niche that could provide a foundation for long-term economic growth and economic development. And we are going to talk about some possibilities later, but that's the first challenge. So, you know, when we think about Japan, we think technology. When we think about European Union, we think about strength in you know, union. When we think about the US, well, it's a combination of things, you know, capital, technology. Okay, what do we want people to think about when we say Latin America? Right now, everybody thinks, oh, raw materials, cheap labor, right? But that obviously has not worked very well for Latin America. So the region has to figure out something else. And number 2, Latin America has to figure out a response to the changing patterns, I'm just reading here, in the distribution of international power. So you have you have emerging powers like China, for example. Well, India right now is in troubles because of COVID, but India, economically speaking, is also becoming a significant player along with Pakistan. Obviously, Japan is still a major force. In Europe, well, the European Union is kind of shaky right now with the British, you know, leaving, and some important countries like Italy and Spain with fiscal deficits and so forth. But the European Union is still very strong. So the question is, how is Latin America going to respond to this increase in economic and financial power of all these different players? The US at the north, the Europeans in Europe, and obviously Asia with Japan, China, India, and so forth, right? So this is important, and I want to make sure we cover this box, and you can read this on your own. I really don't want to spend too much time on this point, but Latin America, unfortunately, finds itself at a serious disadvantage, because despite the fact that Latin America has around 700 million people all together, which is roughly speaking twice the population of the US. So here in the US, we are around, I just saw the most recent numbers and I forgot, but I think there are around 340, 350 million people in the US. Well, in Latin America as a whole, we're talking about 700 million, right? So twice as big. Latin America is not a global power. Latin America, especially when you have internal conflict, the Venezuelan people fighting with Colombia because of territory, or who wants to get control over the Panama Canal in Central America, or very old disputes between Argentina and Chile. All of this, especially when Latin America is fragmented like this, Latin America is powerless to negotiate as a region with other major superpowers. So in this reformulation, reconfiguration, restructuring of the rules of the game that are going to dictate, the 21st century in terms of technology, in terms of economic dominance, in terms of international trade, Latin America doesn't have a very good seat, or let's put it this way, doesn't have a seat at the table of the conversations, right? It is true, let me move on here, that the relationship between the US and Latin America that typically has been, characterized by confrontation, mistrust, and so forth, the US is not the only dominant variable in the political economy of Latin America. So what I'm talking about here is that now you have a significant amount of intervention by European powers, not in the colonization sense. We just went over the Monroe Doctrine, and it's clear that the US is not going to allow that. But commercially, financially speaking, when the US is inviting, or in some sense, forcing Latin America to open to international trade and to open to international finance, obviously you have the Europeans establishing presence, the Asian companies establishing presence in Latin America. So the influence of the US in that sense has been diminished because the European and Asian economies are exercising more influence as well. Interestingly, and this is something that is a bit beyond political economy, this is more in terms of sociology, anthropology, and the closest I can think to a business is probably marketing. The US has figured out that it is also important now that military intervention, now that economic sanctions are kind of secondary in terms of foreign policy, it is very important to keep the influence in Latin America through very different means. And by this I mean to exercise influence in terms of society, education, consumption patterns, lifestyle, and so forth. So let me give you an example. I've been in some small towns, in rural locations in Mexico and other Latin American countries where they probably don't have a bank. The school is in really bad shape when they have one. The roads to get there are terrible. I mean, they have a lot of issues to deal with. But guess what? If you go to the local store, there is a huge refrigerator sponsored by Coca-Cola, right? They do have that. No, it cannot be absent. And if you go to the homes of these people with this rabbit antenna, because there is no cable, in the open channels, you can see people watching, I don't know, The Simpsons, obviously translated to Spanish. Or, I remember when I saw that, you probably remember this show, Seinfeld, in Spanish. So the idea is that through this penetration in the culture of Latin American countries, the US is influencing taste, so that now many people in Latin America prefer, Nike sneakers over locally produced sneakers. They prefer commercially, internationally produced sitcoms like The Simpsons or the most recent ones than, you know, local TV. And of course, that obviously increases the influence, multiplies the influence. And of course, that's how the American companies make money. And obviously, in all of these shows and in all of these, you know, marketing through the shows and so forth, obviously they put the US in a very good, very positive light, right? At the same time, this is important, guys. Latin American countries are conscious of this. They understand that diversification is the key to reduce risk, to minimize dependency on one particular country. So different countries, you know, I kind of wrote his have been quietly cultivating political and economic partnerships with other countries. For example, in Cuba, there is a significant amount of Spanish investment in hotels. In Nicaragua, you have a Chinese investment. You know, I think I mentioned the story of the idea of building a second canal. It turns out that because of technology and because of the power of the engines, the ships are getting too wide. You know, you probably remember what happened just a few weeks ago in Egypt, of this ship that kind of turned and got stuck in the canal, you know, blocking the flow. I mean, that was a major international incident. Well, in Panama, the Panama Canal, when it was built, it was, you know, this narrow, and over time they were gaining a bit, you know, a bit of width, but they reached the limit. And now some Chinese and other, you know, international ships are way too thick to get through there. So they have to go around. Anyway, the idea is that the Chinese, they want to build a second canal, which is, you know, not 100 years old, but much more modern and wider and better. Anyway, the point is that Latin American countries understand the importance of seeking assistance and seeking partnerships with countries that are not the US. Anyway, so that's the first point. That's the first point. Let me see. The second point I want to make is this. Let me see, where is that? Hold on, right here. Okay. So remember we talk about this political pendulum. So I don't know if let me get this on the screen. So during the import substitution industrialization, the pendulum was swinging to the left. So heavy government intervention, lots of regulation, taxes, subsidies. Now the ISI model collapsed in the 80s, and then the pendulum starts swinging towards the center, and then it starts swinging towards the right, right? And this is the IMF, World Bank conditionality, let me change hands, you know, swinging towards the right. Deregulation, privatization, flexibilization of all markets, right? But then, remember, we had the new left that when they saw that these neoliberal policies were producing some economic growth, but not economic development, they ran in these populist platforms and they start winning. So guess what? During the new left years, Latin America starts shifting and swinging back towards the left, right? So this is where more or less we are right now, because now what you see in some places, for example, Colombia, Brazil with Bolsonaro, the new left is losing strength and neoliberal policies are coming back. So it seems like the neoliberal ideas somehow, despite the fact of these dramatic swings, you know, during the ISI industrialization or later during the new left, somehow neoliberal policies seem to get back. So I want to say a couple of things about this. I don't know. I mean, there are many hypotheses and many ways to approach this, but one important element that we need to consider is that unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to see it, neoliberal policies have huge champions. I'm talking about people like Milton Friedman. I'm talking about people like, many people that have won Nobel Prizes, politicians in the US, in Europe, all of them preaching and in some cases practicing neoliberal policies that people in Latin America can always refer to say, look, this is a successful approach. Look, this guy, maybe just passed away a few years ago, but how right he or she was, right? On the other hand, you have new leftist strategies and policies, and in most cases, the people they refer to and the policies they refer to are linked directly or indirectly with communist, socialist ideas. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, after the elimination of the Berlin Wall, and all of these things happening, they are not the most fashionable. They are not the most convincing, according to some, and therefore, they have not been able to articulate an independent, solid, new set of principles and theories that can actually counterbalance the strength of the neoliberal arguments, other than the evidence. The evidence is clear in Latin America. It's the region in the world with the highest levels of income inequality and wealth inequality. So the evidence is clear, but they have not been able to articulate a theoretical and a policy response strong enough to keep the Latin American direction pointing towards the left. Another problem, obviously, like we have discussed, is corruption. And obviously, many of the the leftist policies have failed because obviously rich countries don't like that. And, we had, US foreign policy, intervention, sanctions, and many other issues. So it's quite complicated, but in general, I think that's a very important thing for you guys to think about what can, if that's what the way they want to go, how are they going to articulate a policy set, a theoretical body that can actually counter the very strong foundations of the neoliberal policies. All right. Yes, Cody, you have a question.
Yeah. So given that the developed countries of the world sort of push, or at least most of them, the US and sort of the EU, I guess, in particular, push neoliberalism and free market economies so sort of vigorously, doesn't it seem natural that the response to sort of this one extreme would always be the extreme you sort of see in some new left countries, where they go to the extreme left when maybe a lot of countries, or the US, pushes sort of the extreme right in a way of super free markets, even if it's not a genuine contention they're putting forward. But isn't it sort of the natural response that if Latin American countries are having this idea forced on them, that the sort of response to that would be going in the opposite direction as far as you can?
Well, my answer to that, Cody, is not necessarily, because the same way even neoliberal minded people understand the importance of government intervention. I mean, think about the US, for instance. We think that we live in the freest society in the world. This is the place where we enjoy the most freedom, of anywhere in the planet. But is that true? I mean, at what extent is that true? You have regulation all over the place, on the roads, taxes, you get the point, right? We have Social Security, Medicare, welfare system. The same way they realize that government must play a role, the new left or the leftist approaches, for the most part, don't deny that markets are probably the most efficient way to solve the economic problem of scarcity, to allocate resources efficiently. I don't think there is a dispute about that. So there is some common elements between these two seemingly distant opposites. You know, what I think it would be more intelligent and more appropriate, quite frankly, is that, you know, we try to figure out a way to enhance these common elements and agree on those and minimize the differences, because unfortunately, and this is I say this without qualification, politicians have hijacked, have appropriated some of the language that in economics has a very different meaning, right? So, for example, they say free markets. Oh, free markets, free. But we know that that doesn't exist. There is nowhere on earth where we have a true free market. That doesn't exist, right? So, okay, I'll let you follow up, Cody. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess that was sort of the point that I'm making, that the U.S. and sort of a lot of Western politicians, they paint the idea in Latin America that free trade and no barriers is going to help everybody. But in our own markets, we don't actually practice that. You touched on it a bit about sort of not practicing what we preach. Mm-hmm. And that was the point I'm making, is the Latin American countries see this extreme of, we want you to sort of allow industry to develop without so much regulation. And it works there because there aren't really government institutions to regulate those businesses. So the point that I was making is this sort of raw form of free trade that happens there is a lot different than what we experience. So I guess it's in the mind of the people there, since they see this this extreme of free trade, then their response would be the extreme of sort of socialist government. And I agree that the middle ground probably seems like a better route, and it hasn't really been tried too much. So maybe it's a bit more effective there. But
yeah, let me put it this way, Cody. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me put it this way. This idea of the American dream, right? That we had a nice home with a nice backyard, with your car parked in the garage, you have a nice TV and internet and all of the, this is what we are trying to sell to the rest of the world in the US, the leader of the free world, right? So basically, we're telling everybody around the world, including Latin America, that if we implement in Latin America the policies that they are recommending, it's a no-brainer. Just let the markets work, let the free enterprise do its magic and all of that thing, right? But what I'm proposing is not that. I'm talking about a more honest conversation. Let me put it this way. If you can you hear me, guys? Give me a thumbs up, because I'm having troubles with my video and my sound too. All right.
Yeah, we still hear you.
Somehow it switched to my laptop. Anyway, sorry, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so this is what I'm proposing. And I know you cannot see me, but I can see you guys. The scientists of the world, and actually you don't have to be a science to figure this out. The amount of raw materials that we have in the world and the current level of technology, it's with the amount of resources and the current level of technology, it's impossible that 8 billion people on Earth can have what we have in the US. There is not enough rubber for the tires. There is not enough glass for the windows. There is not enough energy to sustain the life that we have in the US. So we are selling a lie, because we need, like, I don't know, another planet Earth to achieve this. Maybe perhaps 2 or 3 planet Earths, and we are not there yet, I don't know if perhaps if Elon Musk was listening to me, perhaps Mr. Musk would say, hey, Dr. Avalos, he's not a dreamer like I am. Of course it's possible. Well, remember, I'm qualifying this. With the current amount of resources on Earth, one Earth, our planet, and with the current level of technology, for decades, perhaps centuries, we have been telling the world a lie. It's not possible. It's not possible. And I think this is part of the honesty in the conversation that has been lacking, I'm gonna try to fix this really quick because it bothers me that you cannot see me. I think I have an idea. Hold on. Let me try this. Hopefully this works. All right. I think I'm back, right? Give me a thumbs up, please. All right, good. I don't know, for the last couple of days, without notice and for no apparent reason, my system switched back to my laptop. And anyway, okay. So again, just to finish this point, I really think that what we need to do is more serious and more honest leadership that is evidence-based and scientific informed, because again, in many instances around the world, what we had or have had is people that are not very honest with each other, and they are, well, creating alternative realities and things like that. And that's kind of a scary thing because, well, for evidence-based type of things, I think there is only one truth, right? And that's the one that we should seek. Eden, right in time for finals. Yeah, that's right, Eden, that's right. Anyway, let me finish my one last point I want to make. And then let's see, where is my sharing screen? Right here. All right. So one final point, and like I said, we can call it a day. What are the options for Latin America? Well, or what can Latin American countries do in terms of figuring out, remember these two challenges that I mentioned at the beginning. One is what some economists call the unilateral approach. I'm sorry, the unilateral economic liberalization approach. And sometimes people call this plurilateral approach, which doesn't make any sense. But the point is that rather than trying to negotiate with powers in Europe or Asia or the US, you can unilaterally pursue a trade and commercial policy that you believe is advantageous to you. For example, Chile was one of the first countries, actually one of the most few successful countries to achieve some success using this strategy. And I think I mentioned this, that they were the first ones to learn how to exploit the differences in the seasons across the year between the northern and the southern hemisphere. And this is why if you go to Costco right now, or not right now, but during the off season for strawberries or the off season for grapes, you can find Chilean grapes, Chilean peaches, Chilean salmon at Costco, or whatever. I'm making this up, but the point is that and they didn't have to negotiate anything. They just said, well, we are just going to try to grow things when they are not growing over there. We know that there is the demand for these things, and we're just going to sell them. Very interesting approach that in the case of Chile worked for different reasons. For example, Chile didn't have a large and dominant commercial partner, like, for example, Mexico. Mexico wouldn't be able to do that, not only because we are in the same hemisphere, but also because, well, the US will pick that up really quick and will probably do something about it. Chile, isolated, way down south, tons of natural resources, not just land, but the coast is huge, and that's how they produce tons of tuna fish, and salmon, especially salmon. And of course, a relatively small population. This is an odd number. I think the population right now is approaching probably 20 plus million people, maybe 30 million people. But compared to a country like the US, it's a tenth of the population. So it's easier to organize, easier to manage, easier to coordinate, and so forth. So there are some advantages that some economies have relative to others in Latin America. And this is why there is not a single formula for success. There is no silver bullet that works for all. Each country has to develop its own. Option number 2, joining the US, joining the North. Obviously, Mexico in 1994, that was the idea. So looking to the South, Mexico decided, oh, these guys cannot get their act together. They are way too dispersed. This dream of Latin American integration is just not going to happen. We're out. We are going to join forces with the US and Canada. And that's what Mexico did, right? And then we can discuss all day long, whether this was beneficial or not. That's beyond the scope of the class, at least for now. But that's another option. Some other countries in Latin America, especially in Central America, are thinking about that. Who are they closer to? Not geographically speaking, but economically, economic distance. That's what I'm talking about. Are we closer to the US and Mexico, or closer to Brazil, Argentina, Chile? So this is why, you have a lot of conversations taking place between Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, about possibly, establishing some sort of commercial agreements with the US. Let me see here, chat here. Puerto Rico. What about Puerto Rico, Sandeep?
Well, ever since, I'm not saying Latin American countries should do this, but they have the highest per capita GDP in regards to the whole Caribbean and Latin America area, right? And are they considered Latin American?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the current state, because this is a matter of international law, but Puerto Rican people are US citizens. They carry a US passport. So although they technically speak Spanish and they are part of the Caribbean, I think they are considered a territory of the US right now, Sandeep. And in fact, the conversation right now is whether they want to become another state of the US or not. It could be something like Hawaii, right? It's an island way off there, but it's a state of the US, or Alaska. Well, Puerto Rico could eventually become that. So Puerto Rico is in a very different ball game, because they don't have their own currency. They use US dollars. So it's a different country, but it's a territory of the US. Yeah. So my point is that they are part already of the US. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I got.
Okay. Anyway, number 3. This is the dream of many people in Latin America: regional or sub-regional economic integration. Is it possible for 700 million people in 28 plus countries, Latin American countries, to join forces? Can you imagine if they somehow figure out a way to coordinate efforts, to coordinate policies, similar to what, say, the Europeans did? So you have Italy, you have Spain, you have France. Think about that. They are close to each other, but culturally speaking, they are very different. They don't speak the same language. They come from different racial ethnicities because of history, and yet they figured out how to join forces, and they created the European Union. In Latin America, they have very similar history. They speak the same language. They are very close. They are very similar to each other in natural resources and so forth, and yet they have not figured out how to work together, right? Yes, Cody.
So just thinking about that, I think in the beginning, the reason the EU worked is because the largest countries in Europe had a common interest, and they sort of banded together to get it work. But in the Western Hemisphere, the whole class has kind of pointed out that the US is the one power that sort of dictates policy in the Western Hemisphere. And do you think maybe that's the biggest reason this hasn't sort of come to pass?
Yeah, that's partially the answer to this question, Cody. So every time, as a matter of foreign policy, that there was, one or two steps forward towards Latin American economic integration, obviously this was not in the best interest of the US. So as a matter of foreign policy, we did something. So we figured out a way, to apply this divide and conquer type of policy that the Romans taught us. Just make sure that they don't talk to each other. Make sure you put a wedge in the relationship, whether it's territorial or political or something. Just don't let them join. And obviously it has been very successful. So yeah, as a matter of foreign policy, especially because in some of the most successful cases of what looked like potential regional integration was based on communist, socialist ideals. That was the common link. And obviously the US said, no way, no way. And this is how we got rid of Salvador Allende in Chile. And, we got rid of other, regional leaders because that looked very dangerous to US interests. So, yeah. Now, the story goes as well in the opposite sense. What about one of the larger countries to take leadership, like Brazil? It's a super large country, the largest in terms of economic size and also in population. So why can they take over? Well, that's a possibility that has not materialized either. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Number 4, because I'm running out of time, seeking extra hemispheric partnerships. So rather than looking up to the US, rather than looking to your neighbors, what about if some countries, like some of them have done, look for partnerships outside Latin America, with the European Union, with China, with Japan? And this has happened relatively recently. And so far, not with a huge amount of success, because the political economy concept that we apply to understand this is called asymmetrical significance. The idea that Latin America is not as important to the Europeans or the Asians as the European and the Asians are for Latin America, right? So the potential benefits and the potential gain are way higher for Latin America of joining forces with the Europeans or the Asians, but not the other way around. So obviously, Europe and Asia have the upper hand in this type of negotiations, and they control the time, they control the conversation. So anyway. Oof. I can keep I could keep talking about this, for hours, but obviously we have no time. We reached the end of the hour and pretty much the end of the material for this class. So what is left is 2 exams and your paper, guys. Thank you everyone for being here. The ones that were here or watching the videos, participating live or email. If there is no questions, I'm going to stop here and I will see you on Wednesday for the exam.
Hey, Professor, I just wanted to talk to you real quick after class, if I could.
Sure. All right, no problem. Cody, it's 2:50, so you're welcome to leave. Thank you, guys. I'll see you on Wednesday. Yes, Cody. I'm going to stop recording now. But yeah, you can go ahead.